even if the space launch system becomes too expensive and has to go offline, we still have the commercial crew to develop, and the focus of everything here, and I think the message that you're going to see in 2019 is push to explore. And you see that with so many different things. You see that with all of pop culture. There's so much space references, all the movies that have come out that are in space, that are referencing space, that are really good space movies. You see just the same kind of excitement that I would expect you saw back when there was some human flight actually happening with the shuttle. We're returning to that kind of it being in the, I guess, zeitgeist is the word I'm looking for, but it's in the mind of everybody. You know, to see all those people respond to Mars Insight, a lander that, I can be honest because I follow this all the time, wasn't really advertised that much, but people heard there was something, they followed it. And that momentum that we have right now with space and the space industry and it being a space culture, all of this is really important because at the same time, you have not only human spaceflight returning, but you have companies like Rocket Labs and the Electron rocket that now NASA has decided is a new class of rockets, the venture class of rockets. And what that means is all of these universities and businesses that do scientific research, that need scientific research in orbit or with microgravity, and never mind all the other businesses that could pop up that could use a CubeSat or a microsatellite. There's now a push up at the top from NASA to put a class of rockets to do that because historically there hasn't been enough time and resources. You had to piggyback on a rocket that was already going up there. You had to meet the mission profile that was happening, and that's very difficult. And you could see at least 6 months before you would even get on a launch, never mind developing that rocket. So you're talking about years and years of money and effort going into a possibility of launching. And now you see with the Electron rocket and Rocket Labs a whole expansion of what's available. You've got SpaceX that's expanding human spaceflight, return to the moon at a speed that we didn't have before SpaceX existed. There was no plan to go to Mars. There was plans to go mine an asteroid or bring it close enough that we could then send humans, but no strategy to get to that point. That was during President Obama's years. That was the goal, was to really focus on asteroid mining. And that's another thing that's going to expand, this space economy. And that's what I'm really excited to dive into this year, those big topics of what happens if we do get this right? What happens if the space flight industry becomes a space economy? What happens if all of the demand of going into space meets with the actual access and economical flights, frequent flights to go into space? What happens if those two meet at the same time? This is something that I saw in college that I always dreamed and hoped would happen when I was studying to be an aerospace engineer, learning about this, watching SpaceX develop the early stages of landing a rocket where they would have this stiff, it was called the Grasshopper, and it was just stiff legs that were on the bottom of a rocket. They would lift it up a little bit and then try and land it back down. To think that we are where we are, not even a decade later, it's insane, and there's now more momentum behind it. Back then, I was one of, unless you were going to school for that or you were a super space nerd, you weren't paying attention to that. People are paying attention to SpaceX launches and landings and all of the new stuff that's going on. People are taking sides. People are, oh no, I'm Blue Origin, or I'm Virgin Galactic, or I'm SpaceX, or I'm NASA. All of this combining together with the reality of us actually doing things in space, and then having an industry built around the fact of getting people into space, getting more scientific research done in space. And then you've got people like Brian Stoffel and Stoffel Aerospace, where startups, people that are building rockets, in Stoffel Aerospace's case, they're building 3D printed rockets. He's doing it in his basement, right? They're 3D printing rockets, lifting it up on a balloon, launching it from there. They're coating the same material, same plastic that I can 3D print, basic 3D printing materials, coating it in a material that withstands the heat of all they need to launch. And then they've got their Hyperion drone that's essentially going to be able to bring your payload, whatever research you're doing, bring it into space, and then it'll literally, potentially, if it clears the FAA and they're actually able to do this, it could go to that person's place of business where the research will be You take whatever was being researched, you put it in the lab immediately afterwards, instead of letting the gravity ruin that experiment after you launch something up, they get it from the sea, blah, blah, blah. Quicker access, more economical access to scientific research, all of those things lining up and meeting together. 2019 is only the start of that. So I'm super excited about what's to come in 2019. I know you are, and all I can say is stay tuned. We're going to have a ton to talk about. And if you have any ideas, please feel free to reach out to me on Facebook, Today in Space Podcast, on Twitter, Today in Space Pod, or at El Greco, ELGR3CO. Then you've also got me over at todayinspacepodcast@gmail.com. Check out todayinspace.net, the website. You can find everything and search it easily. So if you ever need any scientific content on space, it's there. We've got tons of it. And that's one of the original missions. I was an aerospace engineer when I was in college, and there was very little extra material that you could research. You couldn't Google a lot of this stuff back then. This wasn't like stuff you could just find. That has all come up in the last few years. And part of Today in Space was, all right, well, if there isn't content out there, let's put content out there. So I'm going to keep doing that. We're going to keep bringing that to you. And for 2019, all I can say is it's a fantastic future, and all we're going to do is spread love and spread science. We got a lot coming. I'm not going to spoil it. So I hope you have a great year. Enjoy yourselves. And as always, spread love and spread science. I'll see you then.